Okay, I'd like to come down here and join you and talk with you. And I just want to start by saying that although there are quite a few slides, the slides will be available on the LSCB website later, so they're there for you to use. So take them away, cascade them, make the most of them. And Emma, can I thank you? I've spoke to a number of young people who've been through journeys like yourself, and I think being brave and coming and talking to everybody today, if there's one thing people remember, I hope it's your words at the end of today. Okay. Okay. What I'm going to invite you to do now is to hold on to what Emma shared with you and to think about what you can do, because as Emma's been brave and stood up here and talked to you, I want you to be brave, and I think you have to be as individuals to tackle this issue. And we've talked about sexual exploitation and how it sanitises things. And I think in my experience, I see lots and lots of information sharing going on, lots of passing bits of detail from one agency to another. But it really concerns me that people aren't talking to children and young people who they think are at risk as much as they might do, aren't saying to them, I'm really worried about what's happening to you. So I'm going to take you through this, and I'm going to name some key messages as we go that I think are really important, and probably echo some of what Sheila's said, and also Emma. So I'm going to talk to you about a little bit about how children and young people become involved, and the impact of their abuse, and also what you can do. So emphasis is really on what you can do in this. The first key message I want to give is about language. Still today, I hear about children being described as being involved in prostitution. You might not think so, but I've reviewed records, I've talked to people, and that language is still there. And this is an adult model of prostitution, but this is, I think, if we went back to the late 90s, the manner in which people would perceive children. They talk about rent boys, they talk about children or child prostitutes, they talk about punters and pimps. And I think we've just got to get absolutely away from that, and we've got to be brave and challenge if we hear that kind of language. We're talking about children who are abused, and we're talking about the men who control them are child abusers, and the men who want to have sex with those children are sex offenders. So let's make no mistake about that, okay? And I just want to turn that on its head, because in reality what you've got, as Emma's very, very clearly outlined to us, is a child with the weight of the world on their shoulders. And it's not, often it's not a child with one abuser. Children are being passed around, are becoming so engrossed in that sexual exploitation that they're multiple offenders, and many of those young people would never be able to remember how many men had abused them in that manner. I think Emma's probably outlined this by far better than I can do for you. So she's talked about that engagement process, and that engagement can go on for a year, 2 years. I came across a child who was 11 when she first met her perpetrator online. He chatted to her for a while. She'd just seen it as somebody being friendly to her. He was a bit older than her. He was 19. And then 2 years later, after one of her parents had died, he looked her up again. He was friendly again. She ended up looking to him for comfort and support. But that grooming began at 11 years of age, and it wasn't until she was about 14 that she was actually exploited and abused by him. And that dependency, we're talking about children who are completely isolated from their families and friends over time, how their whole network of contacts, relationships changes, and the control, the dependency that there is, that can be for money, for food, and children, young people who are being made to be drug dependent at a very, very young age. You know, children who are 12, 13 years of age, who are heroin addicts because they've gradually been fed different drugs and so believe that they've got debts to pay off and therefore need to return favours for those debts. And horrendous abuse. You know, we use words, we talk about rape, we talk about sexual assault. But I've spoke to young people who have been, that's been their daily experience. And we're not talking about these things happening at night or just when young people go missing. These things can happen in the day. It can be, you know, 20 minutes of being picked up, taken somewhere. So I think it's think very broadly is what I would say. Don't think this is something that just happens when a young person goes missing and is away for a week or so. This is something that can happen to a child, young person when they're living at home and they pop out in the afternoon, you know, or they're in a residential home and they go off for an hour or two. Now, the definition, Sheila, I don't know quite how many words there are. Is it something like 80 or 100 words in the whole of the definition? It's too big. Yeah.
It's not relevant any longer.
No.
In the same way.
Yeah, thank you. But I just want to tease out a few things from it. The definition is actually over 3 sides. It's there for you. The important thing for me is under 18. I think there's a massive challenge for 16, 17-year-olds. I think when young people are 16, 17, their access to services and support is not the same as it is when they're under 16. I think we are challenged in terms of consent issues. I think it is easier for us to not respond to 16 and 17-year-olds than it is to 14, 15-year-olds. So I'm giving you that challenge as well today to think about that. Also, you know, the definition talks about young people receiving something. People can get kind of hooked up on the issue of money and money exchanging hands. Money doesn't have to be involved at all. And for young people where they're made to be dependent, having that affection or that attention can be enough to cause them to want to be with that offender that will then abuse them again. And I also want to talk a little bit about children can be sexually exploited and abused and not even know about it. So if pictures are taken or they've innocently shared pictures with others, then those images may be passed on to someone else and then used to threaten or blackmail children. And I think, you know, the world is rapidly changing. You know, I know I struggle to keep up. I've got 3 youngsters myself, and I'm constantly learning all the time about new media and opportunities that there are. But I think the reality is that young people may not know this has happened to them until it's too late, and that can be used to threaten them. And the issue about choice, I think Emma's covered that one for me. So we're going to have a quick look now at other ways in which children are exploited and groomed, because Emma's story is like the story of many other young people, but there are many other ways in which children will become groomed and exploited as well. And when I spoke to young people, their view of what's happened, and I'm talking about young adults now, I'm not talking about children under 18, their view is that nobody could have done anything that would have made any difference at the time. You know, and I've said, what could have made a difference? Is there anything that anybody could have done? It wouldn't have mattered, is what they've told me, what anybody did. Now, I think there are things that we can do, but I think the power of that belief, that, you know, that at the age of 25, they still believe there's nothing that anybody could have done because of the power of the perpetrators. They'll also talk about things like that they've put themselves at risk, they've put themselves in that position. And I think we have to be careful that we don't use language like that when we're describing what's happening to children. The grooming process. We're talking about targeting, and that targeting is about noticing those children who are vulnerable, but it isn't always children who are vulnerable. Any one of our children in this room could be targeted. Age in itself is sufficient for a child to be targeted. And the friendship, as I've said, can go on for a very long time. What might appear to be a loving relationship can gradually become abusive. But technology, I think, means that that can happen much more rapidly. So targeting and friendship forming can happen, and as adults you may not even be aware that that's going on. Yeah, so young people may quite innocently, if children, young people will be pleased with the number of people that are friends with them on Facebook. You know, the bigger the better. Yeah. The friendship forming stage. As adults, it is very difficult to know exactly what friendships children, young people make, and the networks are massive. But if you look at that kind of loving and abusive relationship stage, the impact of technology is that that can mean that very, very quickly children can be abused and exploited in a manner that, you know, we would not even be aware of. And so different models. Sheila touched on gangs, and in terms of gangs and organised groups, they're two different things. They can be one and the same, but they can be quite different. So trying to recognise and spot children who are being sexually exploited in gangs, I think, is another major challenge. Children will be asked to do sexual favours as a form of initiation into a gang. Children, young people will be raped in other gangs as a means of punishment. As well as all the issues that you've got about disclosure and the kind of fears for children of telling about these things, you've got the power of gangs as well around them in that context. We've talked about the boyfriend model, but I also want to say a little bit about peers. I think we've seen quite a bit of older children taking younger children along with them to protect them or look after them. In fact, what's really going on there, I think, as Emma said, these perpetrators are extremely skilled, clever. They're sanitising and making it normal for those younger children to see what's happening in that context. It brings their guard down. It makes it easier for them to then manipulate and exploit them as well. The thing that's common in all of this is by the time a young person is being severely sexually exploited, the sense of shame, the sense of responsibility that they have themselves, the length to which they will have been emotionally abused, physically abused, sexually abused, the isolation that they've got, and the fear of telling anyone, the combination of those things, why would they disclose to you? Most of the time, children aren't going to disclose in this context. So another key message is that we need to be smart about how we are going to spot the signs and share information and begin to tackle the issue. Now, I'm going to show you a DVD in a moment, and I want you to watch that and think about some of the things that push or lead to a child, young person looking for comfort, attention, and some of the things that pull or draw a young person into that situation. And I'll give you a couple of minutes afterwards to just have a brief reflection about that on your tables. But can I give you a health warning before you watch it? It's only about 10, 11 minutes, but it's quite a powerful DVD. It tells one young person's story. So I do want you to have a couple of minutes afterwards just to sort of talk about those push and pull factors together. So if we could show that now, that would be great, thanks. You've heard some really powerful messages this morning, and I think I need to let you have 10 minutes or so just to have some conversation on your table about what you've seen what you've heard from Emma, and to think about those push and pull factors, the things that lead to children, young people being seriously abused in these situations. So if you can do that, and if one of you can just take a few notes on your table, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay, thank you, everybody. Are there any questions or issues that come up from your discussion? Any comments, any issues? Yeah?
We talked about how the perpetrators try to make everything normal so that they can sort of get their wicked way, I suppose, and that, you know, even washing the pants in the DVD was that normalised triggers and behaviours and things that these perpetrators do to make things seem like it's normal. Come and live with me, and, you know, you'll have to wash my pants and cook me dinners, and that's what young people would expect as being normal to do when you live with somebody.
This is really important because it's about trying to understand the child's world. You know, what's it like for them every day? How do they perceive what's going on? And it is their normality. It might be shocking to us to hear about an incident or an event that comes to our attention, but we need to really be curious about what's going on in their life day by day. Anybody else want to raise any points that you talked about? Any comments? Okay, just a lady there, thanks.
I think one of the things that struck me is that, and it came from Emma's story, was just how much society we still perceive as the perpetrators as dirty old men in brown Macs hanging about in park offering kids sweeties. And as a society, I don't think we've ever got beyond that. And I think our challenge as professionals is how do we... I mean, Emma's story started as a regular teenage thing, going to the mall and hanging out with her friends. And how do we get into kind of working with young people who, let's be honest, by the time you've hit 20s, you're suddenly going to be uncool and whatever you say to them isn't going to be great. And I think, how do we get to the kids early on so they're aware of the risks,
Again,
which are
I
just
think
normal?
A really, really important point. I think many of the children will not perceive what's happening to them as abusive in any kind of way. And I think by the time they're so terribly abused, it's really hard to look at how you keep them safe and protect them, and how we prosecute in those circumstances. And without a doubt, that kind of earlier intervention is something that we've got to work on, I think. Anybody else want to just comment?
I would say, building on the last comment, that we're also focusing a lot on men, but women do this too, and I think that's something we all need to be aware of, that actually it doesn't have to be a man. You know, women are also skilled, I'm sure, in doing this.
Yeah. Indeed, and I think women can groom young people, and when we're looking at issues around perpetrators will come from all ethnic backgrounds, will be of all ages, and I think the messages that the media gives can counterbalance that fact, that reality. They can bias people's thinking, and they can cause us to look for indicators more in certain situations. But perpetrators may be 18, 19 years of age. You know, I've known situations, coming back to your point, where young people are being groomed by somebody who practitioners see as, well, not that much older than him. You know, they're not that much older than the boy, or they're not that much older than the girl. So they don't think that they're grooming them, although all the other indicators are there. They think it's a relationship. And what's happening is those 18, 19, 20-year-old young men are then working with men who are older and passing young people on. And somehow we have to broaden our own thinking to kind of think this isn't just children, young people being exploited by 40, 50-year-old men. This is adults who will abuse children in different ways. I'm just going to take you through a few more slides now, and they are available to you. the issue about boys has just come up, so it's very timely. I think when you're thinking about boys, I'd invite you to think that those push and pull factors can be quite different. And we don't identify boys who are at risk and need to be protected as much as we do girls. We have got a long way to go. So one of my key messages would be, think boys, then think girls. We think girls, then we think boys, I think, if that makes sense. And Barnardo's have done some research, and I've put the link there, so that's available for you, called Hidden in Plain Sight. And that shows that what we know about boys is that often they go missing for much longer periods. And what we also know is that our attitudes are such that we don't protect them as well. We will think about boys in terms of sexually active, sexually exploring their sexualisation. We will minimise things more for boys than we might do for girls. So another key message today is kind of challenge yourself when you're looking at the situation and think, could this be sexual exploitation? You know, I may not have thought about it like that before, but might it be? What's going on? And we've said throughout the morning, do not expect the children and young people in this situation to disclose to you. There are a million reasons why they won't. There are a million reasons why when they're young adults, they will still not recognise what's happened as exploitation, will still believe that they had a boyfriend who dumped them and then passed them on to another boyfriend. And for boys as well, there'll be other reasons why they will not want to disclose, for fear of being labelled, and the fear of violence and threats is huge. And for children who are looked after, the fear of being moved from maybe one placement to another or being put into a secure unit, all those things are there, as well as the threats from perpetrators. And then let's just think about ourselves. Why don't we respond in the manner that we should? I think it's very easy to see all the indicators and not think possible sexual exploitation. It's very easy for us to think this is a young offender, this is someone who's persistently running away, this is someone that's really difficult to engage, hard to reach. And we may not talk to children because we don't know how to, or we don't know, we haven't got the words, or we think they won't respond. But I'd really encourage you today, if it was your own child, you'd be saying, I am so worried about you in terms of, you know, what's going on. Say that to the children that you know. They may dismiss it, but we still need to be letting them know that we care, we're concerned, and we're desperately worried about what's happening to them. And so what do we know when things have gone, sadly, very badly wrong and there have been serious case reviews? The messages that we've got is that the earlier we intervene, the more likely we are going to be effective. And that if you know and spot the signs and share that information, again, the more likely we are to protect children. And this is tough stuff. This is really hard. You need to be able to share when you're worried about a child or young person, your concerns in supervision or with your manager. Or if you work in a hotel or a taxi company, you've got to be able to tell somebody that I've been out last night or somebody's been here and I've seen this, I've noticed this, it didn't look right to me. You've got to know who you can tell and who you can report to. And I think we'll hear more about that later, Julie, when we're looking at the toolkit and what you do here locally. And never forget that kind of power of the perpetrator and how isolated a child really is. So what can you do? Spot the vulnerability factors and notice the indicators that a child may be at risk. And when we think about vulnerability factors, we think often about the children who we know through our work who are the most vulnerable. But you've heard today that this is something that can happen to any child or young person, that they can be targeted. And I think I was struck by what Sheila said earlier on about bereavement. because in my experience, there are a number of young people who are being targeted and groomed when they have been bereaved. And there are children and young people being groomed when they've suffered some other kind of loss, like a fostering breakdown or an adoption breakdown. The times when they're bereft, the times when they're likely in their lives to look for somebody to be caring and show them attention. That's what we're thinking about in terms of vulnerability. And in terms of indicators, what kind of things might you notice, might you see? Mobile phones. Often children will be given a second or a third mobile phone or different SIM cards to swap, to use, to be in contact with different men. You may also notice children going missing, and I've talked about older children taking younger children with them. And as Emma put over today, that isn't older children going out and grooming younger children because they are abusing them themselves. That's older children who are taking younger children along with them because they will have been threatened. So they may have been threatened that if you don't bring somebody along, then I will go and rape your sister. Yeah? So better this girl than my sister. Yeah? It's trying to understand what's going on for those children behind the scene. Truancy, running away, thinking about children who are looking, changes in presentation, huge. So children who will look forlorn, will look desperate. Lots of these children are suffering from anorexia or drug dependency. They will show up at clinics. They will have numerous pregnancies, STIs. You are well placed to spot these children in your schools and in your health provisions. And what we know about running away, and again I've given you the link so that you can look at this research if you want, called Running Away from Hate to What You Think is Love. We know that children run away for a multitude of reasons, but the pattern of risk and the prospects of getting involved in sexual exploitation is extremely high when that's happening. So as I just pull this together, I want you to think about sharing information, recognising signs, and thinking that the more we can spot and notice about places that children are going to, people that they're associating with, groups of people that seem to be hanging around them, or names that keep coming up, share that information, because it's through that we can start to think about collectively working with the police how we can disrupt that abuse and exploitation. So be prepared, have your antennae up when you go away after today, and think about how you can prevent, think about what you can do. We've got a new e-learning product for young people that's designed for schools that Kathy's out there and can talk to you about, that is designed to help young people become aware of these issues. And I piloted it with about 40, 50 young people, and I was surprised that 39 of those 40 young people came to me and said, oh, I never knew things like this really happened. And we go around thinking they do and they're switched on, but actually if you're 12, 13, 14, 15 and life's good, as Emma said, you don't go around thinking this could happen. Stand in their shoes and remember, you know, the way that life seems to them, and think about what they're feeling and what's going on in their world, and realise that they're not likely to talk to you about this. And for yourself, I want you to think about how can you talk to them, what can you do? And I want you to think about what's your responsibility and where can you get some support. We've got, I think, 600 people here today, so there's a massive support here for you. And finally, sexual exploitation is abuse. It's not a lifestyle choice. We've got that message, I think, very clear. And I want you to remember that it's everybody's responsibility to share that information and report those concerns. And if you do one thing, talk to a child that you're worried about and let them know. Thank you.